Today's collectible spot, we are having a look at the Sideshow Collectibles Star Wars, the 6th scale figure of General Grievous. This was a figure I had in my collection for a while. Spot just never got around to reviewing him until now. The new interest in the big thing in media right now is, of course, the Star Wars Force Awakens coming out very, very soon. Star Wars is buzzing everywhere, so I wanted to go in. I thought there's a good chance to go back and have a look at a figure that I always wanted to review, just never got a chance. The box itself features the General Grievous crest logo on the front there, with Sideshow Collectibles 6th scale down below. The back, however, is really fantastic, where you've got, now this is the actual figure. This is an image of General Grievous, but this is what the figure is going to be looking like. You can go to www.sideshowcollectibles.com, and granted, while this piece isn't no longer available on Sideshow's website, you could still pick it up in an aftermarket environment such as eBay and whatnot. That being said, Spot's going to take a break. I'm going to get this opened up, and finally, we're going to have a look at the Sideshow Collectibles Star Wars General Grievous 6th scale figure. There's more heading away, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. With the dear General out of his box, you can see that I've managed to get him a stand. Standing seems to be more problematic with a character this lanky and comprised as much articulated joints as he does. Luckily, though, for a character like this, the folks over at Sideshow Collectibles includes a display stand just right for the General. Now, this one's a little bit wider, as you can see. Most Sideshow Collectible and Hot Toys display stands tend to be about half this width. But General Grievous, because of the size that he is and requires a little more added support, he gets a much wider oval-shaped stand. The crest on the stand matches that of the box, General Grievous's logo, and on the top of the stand is their adjustable neck. It's one of the few examples of a case of a display stand that I've seen before that have not only the swivel point in the adjustable neck, but it does also rotate. And between all that, you can get compensated, I think, for the fact that Grievous may be a little harder to stand. A footprint like this on the display stand plus the adjustable neck definitely comes in handy. As an example of what I mean, I've taken General Grievous, and this clip right here, this little notch point, sits very easily actually underneath Grievous's torso, his lower torso. And it gives you just the right amount of support that you can compensate by then adjusting his legs, and Grievous won't topple over. I wouldn't even gamble putting Grievous out on a display unless you've got the support strut of this display stand. Without it, any little bit of movement, Grievous will guaranteed topple over. As you can likely guess, though, General Grievous is tall. Even with the legs bent, you can kind of see how tall he's going to be. He already is about the height of a standard 6-inch, 6th scale, I should say, figure. But because you are bending the legs, if you were having the legs straight up, guaranteed you'd be having a lot extra. You probably have another third of a figure higher, but with Grievous never really stood upright. General Grievous always was more crouched down, hunched down as he walked through the hallways of his battle station. Now, showcasing him in this look, the lankier appearance of Grievous, he doesn't really even appear like this until near the later end of the movie when he's fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi. Up to that real point, General Grievous has himself a cloak that he wears, and luckily the folks over at Sideshow have also included that as well. The supplied cloak is almost about the same color as Spot's background here. It's a purplish gray color, and when we open it up, it's got the red details inside, and I'm not sure even if the camera's picking it up, but it's almost like a crushed velvet red, but it's got a diamond pattern to it. Again, you might not even see it until you hold it up to the light. A couple also pockets on there as well. I'll show you guys what those are what those are for in a second. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and we'll drape the cloak around General Grievous, and there are a few clasps just on the front here. You want to get it underneath his collar, or the equivalent of what his collar will be, and snap that into place. And you want to, one is a clasp, which clasps in, and then he's got a snap as well. A little harder to do on camera, but you can snap those two together, and you got Grievous with his cloak on. This is easily my more preferred look for General Grievous. I just find like the cloak fills out some of the areas where into the movie, of course, later into the movie, he looks more lankier, especially when he splits his arms off and he's fighting with the dual lightsabers. But preferably, I like General Grievous more so with the cloak cape over top. It just kind of fills in again, doesn't make him look as lanky. With Grievous almost fully stood up, let's get a better look at his face. Grievous's face is super detailed. It matches the same sort of marbling detail that would be on all the plates that make up the majority of his body. We can go ahead and take the faceplate off. It just sits via a magnet, and the magnet is located right at the top here. There's his faceplate there. There was also a Sideshow exclusive version of General Grievous that had, I believe, a battle damaged version of his faceplate, or the front of his face. Ultimately, I just went the route of the regular release. But you can see that his eyes are a nice reptile. They almost bear resemblance to a reptile eye. Yellow in color. We can flip around the back plate, and you can see how these would be not lit up, because there is no light up function to General Grievous, but you can see how light would pass through the eyes and make them glow. Especially like the detailing around the eyes. You can only imagine how scarred his face would be underneath the helmet, because basically he is a cyborg. Mostly whatever tissue is left of him is now covered over in mechanical augmentation, all this extra armor over top. A side profile of the figure, you can see more of the tubing, the pistons, and everything else that would be keeping him alive. Now there is movement in the head. You can move it left and right. It's not as limited as initially I had thought it would be, but you can move the head left and right, and these little rubber hoses will move along with the head. It's a pretty effective means of a super sculpted piece, but still has all the articulation that you would need for moving Grievous. And then also, this secondary neck piece has its own posability. It can still rotate, not maybe to the level that the head can rotate, but you still get a lot of movement in the, I want to say almost the neck brace, the neck section of General's head area. Very nice. The torso area of General Grievous is where you can see the rest of his remains. His heart and what would be left of his organic self resides in the cavity here of his armor. You would think really that this armor would be more enclosed, being that this is his weak point and one that Obi-Wan takes full advantage of. But you can see, like, you can't quite make out the organs inside, but you can make out that there is something underneath that translucent, almost green translucent plastic encasing here. You can see what I mean, though. By incorporating the cloak, the cape over top, it does do a pretty good job of filling in all the extra areas that would be very thin on Grievous. And sometimes what I like to do for posing options, you can either have it over top of his shoulder plates from his armor, or you can also drape them over and have Grievous more covered, as he is predominantly near the beginning of the movie, again, when he's walking through the corridors. Now, why does he have those little pockets on the inside of his cape? Well, it's because Sideshow Collectibles also gives you 4 lightsabers. They're all magnetized. You can all attach them to one another, and they vary in different designs. Some have black hilts, little gold accents, some red buttons. One is more, seems to be more of an older model of lightsaber. Again, with the gold, the silver, and the black. We've got one that looks a little more familiar. And finally, we have another lightsaber. And you can take any one of those, or all of them if you so wish, and you can slide them right into the pockets. Because as Grievous has defeated his opponents, he's kept all the lightsabers in check. You can either have them on the one side, or you can take two and have two on either side of his cape, and those just slide into place. The only downside is with them being magnetized, they tend to want to stick to one another when you're putting them in the pockets. Now don't worry though, those lightsabers aren't the only accessories that you also get with General Grievous. He also comes included with a blaster, which has an aged wash to it. It almost looks like it's a silver or gunmetal gray, but it's been washed over with almost borderline yellow or brown wash. It's enough that gives it that aged look. Something that he's probably had in his collection for a while. Probably something that, again, one of his victims who fell by the hands of Grievous might have owned at one point, and Grievous is now using himself. He also comes with one of his shock staves, one of the ones that his guardsmen would carry with them. I like that they've added these electricity constructs to the very ends of them. Really looks neat. And finally, General Grievous also comes with the same lightsabers as the ones we've kept into his cape, although these ones have the extended lightsaber beams. Two of them are blue. They still have the magnetized hilts. Both of them have, two have blue, and then two have green. And these will be coming in handy when we change out Grievous's arms. By the way, before we go ahead and change out the arms, I just want to show you his arms themselves because we really haven't touched base on them. They're comprised of pistons and rods attaching the arms in sockets. There's a fair bit of posability despite the fact that the arms do feel a little on the more fragile side. The tops of the arms have ball joints, but then these sections here are pistoned. You can see how they move and can move in and out. I do, though, feel that they are a little more on the fragile side, so some caution should be made when moving and bending the arms. When it comes to Grievous's hands, they're a little more on the lankier side, matching pretty much the rest of the aesthetics of his body. Very skeletal-like. You can see that all the fingers are articulated. They're only articulated from the first knuckle, same as well for the thumb. They only hinge in that one area. Now you would ask yourself, well, how would he possibly be able to hold a lightsaber? Guaranteed it's going to fall out of his hand. Well, luckily, with the lightsabers, because they are magnetic, he has magnets on the inside palms as well. So we can move his thumb out of the way, and you can see how the lightsaber attaches to his hand, like so. And then you can go ahead and clasp the lightsaber with the rest of his fingers, and Grievous holds the lightsaber extremely well. I've gone ahead and taken the cape off because now we're going to look at switching out the arms. Now before we do that, I just want to look at the articulation on the piece as a whole, and then we'll go ahead and we'll add the arms. We've already had a look at his head, and his head sits on a individual ball joint, but then there's a secondary joint that adjusts the neck area of Grievous. His arms hinge out, and again, these would be areas where you'd want to have some caution involved. They do rotate forward and back fairly easy enough, also rotate out, but they don't seem to latch, and that's the one thing. When you bring the arms out, they don't seem to want to sit without the initial click. And that click worries me every single time I move the arms, that I feel like something's going to break on Grievous. But you can see the arms do move out, but not without that ratcheted joint clicking first. The arms rotate as well. It's then, again, caution when moving the arm areas there. And he does have the ball joint articulated hands. When it comes to the torso does rotate, but it rotates really stiffly. And again, be very careful when moving Grievous's waist. I wish there was a section that actually could pivot Grievous's spine down, and just so that you could kind of have him more hunched over. You can compensate that obviously by moving the legs, but I wish there was a section here that you could actually have pivoted the torso down as well. When it comes to his legs hinge forward and back. They also slightly pivot out. He has, or go through this with you guys together, he has a double hinge knee. It hinges here and it hinges here. But again, these are plastic joints, so again, be very careful. So they hinge there. He does also have a secondary hinge ball joint here, but again, it's that clicking I worry about. It also rotates the foot. He's got a secondary ball joint right at the base of his, if you want to call it his feet, but this section here also rotates too. So you can get a lot of movement out of General Grievous, but all the while you're doing it, you're going to be worrying a little bit about the piece. So why don't we go ahead now and look at his arms. Above and beyond the singular arms that come included packaged when you get General Grievous out of his box, he also gets, however, a pair of split arms. And these arms are near the end of the movie when he starts wielding his lightsabers, one in every hand, battling Obi-Wan Kenobi. They essentially share the same sort of joints, except when you start looking at the elbows. The pistons are completely now gone, and in its place are hinges in the elbows. They do still rotate, but as you can see, they hinge now in the place of what was pistons before on the singular arms. Also has the same articulation in the fingers. The only difference is, let's bring the fingers out, you can see now, instead of having 4 fingers and a thumb, he's got 2 fingers and a thumb on each hand. Now to change out his arms, this would be the more nerve-wracking end of the review because it will involve me having to pull the arms out of their sockets, something I don't like to do very often. Easiest thing I could suggest doing is hold onto his torso and ever so slightly wiggle the arms out of their sockets. In fact, if you even find it easier to work with, you can unpeg the hands completely, the arms completely, until you have just the pegs, and then from there you can adjust and pull the pegs off on their own. I'll show you exactly what you need to pull out. You need to pull out the cap of the shoulder. Don't pull out this joint here, but you want to pull out the top here, and you're going to pull it right from the top of his torso until you get something that looks like that. Then go ahead and you're going to take the entire arm section, and that's going to peg back into place. You can see how it was much easier to accomplish once I took the arms off. You don't have to fight as much, and then you're just going to wiggle these back into place. Once you've successfully changed out the arms, you have a much more imposing, menacing General Grievous. To the credit of the double arms, I got to say that these ones are a lot more user-friendly. It just seems like I don't have as much worries about bending the arms as I did with the singular arms that had the pistons. These move a lot easier. I love the hinge joints much more. And you got a little more fluid movement, I find, from these without feeling every single time that something's going to break. Now we can go ahead and put the lightsabers into his hands. We're going to do this 4 different times. There's the green one. Maybe we'll alternate. We'll put the blue one over here. And again, each one of these are magnetized. So, see, as you can see, it clips right into place. And then the fingers do a pretty good job of adjusting and holding the lightsabers depending on where you want to keep them. Go ahead and then do the top one. We're just going to move the fingers out of the way. And the somewhat thumb. Peg that in place. Well, not so much even peg it in place. And finally, the last one. Again, magnetize that into its spot. And then close the fingers and the thumb. Just like that. Around it. And you have something that looks like that. Ideally, it's preference based. You might prefer General Grievous with the double arms, or you might like him with the single arms. I kind of, again, move a little more towards the single arms with the cape, just because I like that look of Grievous a little bit more. But you can see really how, with the different interchangeable arms, how many different possibilities you can do for the General here. While there were a few things that I didn't really care for when it came to the prequels, the one thing that I liked the most about the prequels was that it introduced us to General Grievous. By far, he was one of my favorite characters in the entire prequel trilogy. And luckily, we never got ourselves a Jar Jar Binks 6-scale figure. But when the General here was going to be released, I was very, very interested in adding this to the collection. He's fragile, yes. There are areas to him that can be a little more problematic. But the end result, at the end of the day, you've got yourself a really phenomenal piece and very very, like, as a high-end collectible goes, it's something you can put on display. People will be walking by, and guaranteed it's going to be getting looks. Today's collectible spot was having a look at, well, it was an older figure, but we're having a look today at the Star Wars prequel, the 1/6 scale figure of General Grievous. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more collectible spots heading your way. Thanks for watching, as you always do. I'll see you next time.